Hello everybody, welcome to the lecture entitled Why Thomistic Personalism, which is the first chapter of the course Thomistic Personalism, Knowledge and Love. This episode of the lecture, will contain a bunch of information about personalism, and it will be substantially based on a very informative paper by Dr. Matthew Schaefer entitled Thomistic Personalism, a Vocation for the 21st Century. Personalism is a reaction against two equally serious errors in the moral and political realms. The first error, the error most of us no longer worry about, is the error of collectivism, the subordination of the person to the collective in both moral and political matters, in such a way that the true good of persons is excluded and they themselves fall prey to the collectivity. Here the glory of the collectivity reigns supreme. Persons become servants of the whole for the sake of the whole. Collectivism in this sense does not refer to the consequentialist emphasis on taking into account the good of all persons, nor does it refer to the consequentialist emphasis on collecting or maximizing as much good as possible. On the contrary, collectivism here means the ordering of all moral and political activity to the good of the collectivity, that is, the good of the whole precisely as the whole. Collectivism here prizes the flourishing of the community over the persons who constitute it. A non-personal social organism is the ultimate good which practical reason must seek to instantiate. The second error is the error of individualism, the subordination of the good of others to the desires, fears, and preferences of the self in both moral and political matters, producing a system of morals, feelings, ideas, and institutions in which individuals can be organized by their mutual isolation and defense. Here the autonomy and private good of the individual reign supreme. In this sense, individualism is still compatible with a certain kind of respect for others. The bodily integrity and property of others, for instance, should still be respected, but this is justified because each person recognizes that mutual respect in these basic matters best serves his private good and autonomy, and even if it is conceded that each person deserves to be respected for his own sake in these basic ways, this is all that is conceded. Individualism begins with the assumption that persons are morally disengaged from others in their community, and it further seeks to reinforce this disengagement, unless persons choose to eliminate their disengaged position. In the most pure form of this vision, persons self-rulingly choose their own conception of the good, not in the sense of discerning what they should believe about the good, but rather in the sense of really determining and fixing what is indeed good for them. And the ties that bind persons to others are severed in favor of boundary lines which specify the domain in which persons can achieve their private good. Against collectivism and individualism, however, personalism asserts that individualism sees man only in relation to himself, and collectivism does not see man at all, it sees only society. With individualism, man's face is distorted. With collectivism, it is masked. The first and most fundamental commitment of personalism, then, is this. There is a serious need for the third way between collectivism and individualism. Of course, personalist way can take many number of forms, but it always sees in the notion of person, in the term of person, the solution sought. In other words, the main error of collectivism is to overlook the worth of the person, and the main error of individualism is to overlook the communal dimension of the person. And the provenience of both errors is an inadequate awareness of the spiritual nature of the person. Thus, according to personalists such as Max Scheler, Martin Buber, Jacques Maritain, Etienne Gilson, Gabriel Marcel, Emmanuel Mounier, Nicholas Berdyaev, St. John Paul II, and many others. The guiding light of this third way needs to be a philosophical anthropology that acknowledges the integral person. And this is the second commitment of personalism. Working along these lines and keeping the errors of collectivism and individualism before they rise, personalists try to disclose the reality of the person. Although it would be misleading to say that personalists rely on a single method to bring about this disclosure, it is fair to say that personalists often rely on metaphysics, phenomenology, existentialism, and Christian revelation. In the light of these methods, personalists agree upon a basic framework for philosophical anthropology. Non-controversially, personalists assert that persons are rational and free beings of objective and subjective dimensions, and they emphasize that these truths alone highlight the unbridgeable chasm between persons and all else. More controversially, personalists argue that persons are beings for communion, or put it a bit differently, beings for love. In the words of Mounier, the person only exists toward others. It only knows itself in knowing others, only finds itself in being known by them. The thou which implies the we is prior to the I, or at least accompanies it. It is in material nature, to which we are only partly subject, that we find mutual limitation and exclusion, because a space cannot contain two things at once. But the person, by the movement which is its being, exposes itself. It is thus communicable by nature, and it is lonely from the need to communicate. We must start from that primordial fact. When communication fails or is corrupted, I suffer an essential loss of myself. One might almost say that I have no existence, save insofar as I exist for others, and that to be is, in a final analysis, to love. Or in the words of Berdyaev, the realization of personality in man is a continuous transcending of self. This path, that is the emergence from the subjectivity through the process of transcendence, lies in the depths of existence. On this path there take place an existential meeting with God, with other people, with the interior existence of the world. It is the path not of objective communication, but of existential communion. Personality reaches full realization of itself only on this path. And on the top of this claim, that persons are beings for communion or beings for love, personalists make a further controversial claim that the fullest of persons cannot be grasped or had like other objects. Some dimensions of persons are a mystery. Thus Marcel says the following: in fact, it seems very likely that there is this essential difference between a problem and a mystery. A problem is something which I meet, which I find complete before me, but which I can therefore lay siege to and reduce. But a mystery is something in which I am myself involved, making personhood a mystery, and it can therefore only be thought of as a sphere where the distinction between what is in me and what is before me loses its meaning and initial validity. A genuine problem is subject to an appropriate technique, by the exercise of which it is defined, whereas mystery, by definition, transcends every conceivable technique. And Berdyaev moves along similar lines. Personality cannot be recognized as an object, as one of the objects in the line with other objects in the world, like a part of the world. That is why, in which the anthropological sciences, biology, psychology, and sociology would regard man. In that way, man is looked at partially, but there is, in that case, no mystery of man, a personality, as an existent center of the world. Personality is recognized only as subject, in infinite subjectivity in which is hidden the secret of existence. Although personalists do not always agree on what the mystery of personhood amounts to, All personalists, to greater or lesser extent, believe that central dimension of the person cannot be investigated, understood, grasped, had, or deconstructed like other objects. The ontology of the person resists this treatment, for persons are simultaneously objects and subjects. In light of the above, personalists affirm three truths about philosophical anthropology. 1. All persons possess inalienable dignity, and this inalienable dignity is morally prior and morally superior to any notion or abstract principle. 2. The telos of persons is to enter into a communion of love with other persons, and the achievement of this telos, to the extent it is possible from the side of the person in question, constitutes the moral dignity of the person. 3. Persons are mysteries, for the subjectivity of the person cannot be grasped or had like an object. The third commitment of personalism is therefore an affirmation of these three theses about philosophical anthropology, and we can reasonably call these three theses the three pillars of personalism. Agreement with these three commitments of personalism, accentuated to a greater or lesser degree, allows personalists to confirm one another a certain realm of thought, in certain fundamental affirmations and upon certain lines of practical conduct concerning the individual and collective order. Concerning normative ethics, for example, it allows personalists to affirm what St. John Paul II has called the personalist norm. A person is an entity of a sort to which the only proper and adequate way to relate is love. Concerning political philosophy, it allows personalists to endorse institutions and societal structures that respect and promote the inalienable and moral dignity of the person. The enduring value of personalism is therefore negative and positive. Negatively speaking, it rejects collectivism and individualism in both moral and political matters. Positively speaking, it offers the inalienable dignity, communal telos, and mystery of the person as the normative standard by which interpersonal relationship, intrapersonal activity, and political structures can be judged. And this is an outline of the main commitments of personalism.